Hey guys, it's Kevin, my review for this week of Big Brother 26, episodes 34 through 35. Yes, there is no Wednesday episode, although there might as well have been because we literally had a 2-hour episode in place of it. But regardless, this is week 11, and look, going into this week, as I said in the double eviction, yes, it wasn't as exciting as I was hoping that it would be. I really wanted to see a scenario where MJ does get her sort of, consequence for making such a stupid move last week, or just seeing something of Weintraub and Angela winning a veto, Angela winning HOH. Like, there's so much that could have happened at that double eviction, and I kind of knew then and there that, like, this just wasn't going to be as exciting, but I was still cautiously optimistic because I've really enjoyed the entire cast this season. Everybody that's left, I honestly really do like, despite the fact that I have my criticisms with quite a few of them in terms of the way they're playing the game, in terms of, like, personality-wise, in terms of just watching them on the show. I do enjoy them, and so I still was hopeful that this would be a lot of fun. Unfortunately, though, now that we're just at Final 5 and just seeing the way this week has played out, I really just think at this point that they need to start going back to the way that things used to be. Look, Big Brother 21, they did this really cool thing where, pretty much up to that point, we had a format where Final 5 and Final 4 was in the same week, and, essentially... And essentially, we had 2 evictions pretty much back to back. And, it did make it so Final 5 felt pretty rushed. We didn't really get a sense of a lot of what was going on that week. Feeds were down pretty consistently around that time because they didn't want to spoil what happened on the Final 5 episode. And so we didn't see feeds again until after the Final 4 episode. And that was definitely a downside. So them changing that in Big Brother 21, having a much, giving a full week to what was once a accelerated week, I do think was initially a good choice. But I gotta say, since then, aside from maybe Big Brother 24, the Final 5 of Big Brother has always been just such an utter slog to watch, and I think this season is probably the biggest example of that. Now, I will say, compared to last season's Final 5, this is definitely much better. We don't have, like, Matt and Jag and Bowie talking about wanting to keep Felicia all night so she'll, not do well in the power of veto. We don't have them constantly just berating Suri and making her out to be this monster for the way that she played the game. And them constantly, they constantly go on and on about how, like, they're the best people in the house and that they're the ones that haven't been toxic. And, this is definitely not anywhere near that level. It's definitely a boring week, and there's not a lot to really talk about here, but I wouldn't say that this was insufferable because I like this Final 5, and, it's more just very straightforward, and I think that is what does end up bringing this week down, and as such, there just isn't really as much to talk about. I don't anticipate that this is going to be that long, probably over an hour at most, to be honest, because I just don't really have a lot to discuss, and even the things I'm going to talk about here, there's just not a lot to really get into. Things have really slowed down at the Final 5, and so I really just don't understand why at this point they couldn't just do, like, Final 5 on the Sunday episode, and then you can have, because you don't have the Wednesday episode, you can just do Final 4 on the Thursday episode, and then you can just go right into, the finale, that week. I feel like there was no reason to have an extra week of the game. You can tell that they are over it at this point. They already know what they're doing, and aside from, some good moments here and there really just isn't much to talk about at this point because the gameplay is honestly just so incredibly stagnant because it's very obvious the way that things are going to go. This felt very not Big Brother 26 in the way this week ends up playing out. It felt much more standard than what we're used to, and so as a result, like I said, I just didn't really feel that compelled to keep checking in this week and really just I just didn't feel as compelled to really just checking into this week and trying to figure out what's going on and really getting a sense of everything. And I'll even tell you guys right now, I don't have a what we didn't see this week because there just isn't anything to talk about. Like, straight up, there's nothing. Most of this week are the 5 house guests sitting around and them talking about past memories or them talking about what they're going to do after the season. Kimo and Rubina talking about a podcast they're going to do, or Chelsie talking about how she wants to kiss Cam at finale night and things like that. Like, there just isn't much that I could really get into on that side of things. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you right now, I don't think I'm gonna have a section for that point in the episode. But anyway, enough rambling. I've said enough. Let's just go ahead and just jump right into what again ends up being a rather boring week of Big Brother 26 overall. So we're gonna start off with the Sunday episode, and I'll say this right now. We've had some episodes this season that have mostly been really good. I think the episodes this season, the way they've been edited, I honestly have been very impressed. Even when it comes to the comps and things like that, I don't think they've spent too much time. Now, the jury phase of the game, they've spent a little bit more time on things than I wanted them to. I don't think we needed 20 minutes spent on OTEV. I certainly don't think we needed so much time spent on the comps that we did during like Janky Week and things like that. Last week, they spent a lot of time on the Wild Robot comp, but for the most part, I have been impressed by the edited episodes. That kind of stops this week because the episodes, particularly the Sunday one, there's barely anything to talk about. Like, straight up, most of this episode is filler. Most of it is stuff that we know is going to happen, and that really is the thing when it comes this week, is that it's all leading to a rather predictable conclusion, so it kind of just feels like this slow crawl to the inevitable, and that's just not how this season, and in a season that has kind of thrived off this idea of unpredictability and, just so much tension, again, it just feels very dissimilar from what we've come to know, and as a result, it's just kind of disappointing, but I guess we'll just jump into it. So, typically, when it comes to Final 5, coming off a double eviction, that episode is usually very exciting. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't get to see, and as a result, this episode really does give that to us, but unfortunately, this time around, this is probably the least amount of content we've been given regarding a double eviction. I don't really feel like there was anything they told us in this episode that we couldn't have already come to the conclusion of. There's a couple things to talk about here. For example, we do see from the beginning that, like, when Chelsie put up Angela and Kimo, she initially put them up so one wouldn't use veto on the other, but she always knew her target was going to be Angela. And look, I said it now and I'll say it again. I think she absolutely made the right move here. Angela was definitely coming for her. Angela would have definitely made some kind of move. She even said so in her exit interview on multiple platforms, that she absolutely would have targeted Chelsie and Cam, and she would have made a really big move in that way. So yeah, I think definitely it was the right move to take her out here. There are 2 moments here to really talk about. One of them does involve Rubina, who kind of goes to Chelsie, and Chelsie straight up tells her that she is going on the block, and you can see that Rubina isn't really that pleased with it. We'll talk about why this is relevant a little bit later on, but I will say, Rubina, again, mostly impressed by her gameplay this week. I like the way that she does play the game. I like the way that she actively is trying to get herself out of tough situations. It's just kind of at this point there isn't and I do like the way she does try to navigate the game and try to get herself out of some precarious situations. I think she does a good job with that this week. Really, the only other thing to talk about is with Angela, who, look, the thing I will absolutely give Angela, among many other things I've given Angela, because like I said, I think she's one of the big characters of this season and just such a star in that way. And I do think that she, brought a lot of liveliness and fun. Not to say the other house guests haven't, but without her there, you definitely do feel the loss of her presence. But I mean, she does everything she can to really fight. She puts her all into it, talks about how tight of a duo Kimo and Rubina are, how T-Core is on the jury and they need to try to, get Rubina out as a result. There's a really funny moment where after Kimo wins veto, Chelsie basically tells Angela that she's looking for a pawn to put her on the block, and Angela kind of recognizes that she's going to be the target there. But literally, other than that, there's nothing. There's nothing to really talk about. There's nothing to really discuss in terms of double eviction. Like I said, they barely gave us anything to really glean here. And I think it really just speaks to, again, just how predictable of a double eviction that this really was. There really just isn't much to latch onto. And it's disappointing. It kind of is making me think that maybe we need to not do double evictions at Final 6 anymore. I mean, yes, it produced a good moment in Big Brother 24, but like aside from that, when have we seen a double eviction in Final 6 that actually has been really exciting? You know, when have we seen one that generally, you know, opens up the game and does something really shocking? That just hasn't happened. There's a lot less people, and so it's much easier to make outcomes happen. I really do think they need to just put the double eviction back at like Final 11 or Final 10. I think that's the best time to do it. There's still enough people in the house, but not too many people in the house to where you can make a really big move like that and also shock a lot of people. But there's also enough time left in the game for that move to have a genuine impact, where at this point things are already so set in stone. It really just kind of felt like a matter of time before Angela ended up leaving. So yeah, again, kind of just a nothing burger in terms of footage. Like, I wish I had more to say here, but again, they really just didn't show much of anything at all. So we do get a moment where the final 5 is like celebrating, and when I mean they're celebrating, I mean they are just freaking out. They're like throwing they're like dancing on tables. Rubina's like moving around, like moving around salad. They're just like dancing around. I mean, they are just so delighted to be in Final 5. There is a moment where Angela, her picture goes gray and they kind of stop. It was a funny moment, but at the same time, it's like, you guys haven't won the game yet. Like, you're at Final 5. It's not even Final 3. I don't understand why they're so celebratory, but at this point, I feel like it's just a much livelier group than we're used to at Final 5, and I think that's kind of just what it is. Like, we see a lot of this week where they just feel so much more relaxed and at ease, and I feel like that's just kind of the vibe of this cast. Like, I don't necessarily have a problem with them celebrating. It's more so just not what I would expect to see at Final 5, and I think that kind of told us that, yeah, maybe this won't be the most exciting. There is a moment where Cam is like really adamant that he wants to win this HOH. Now that Chelsie has, he really feels good about his chances and really wants to make it happen. Rubina and Kimo are also really gunning for this, but then we go right into the HOH comp, and it ends up being a comp that I honestly didn't think that they were going to do. I thought that maybe we just weren't going to get it this season, but it ends up being what is usually known as Tiny Veto, but I guess now it's Tiny HOH. And look, I've said it before, I do think this comp has kind of run its course at this point. I think that, you know, we've seen plenty of variations with it, but nothing really has ever topped Dave Vaughn winning. But then we did get it in reindeer games last year, and I really like the way they ended up incorporating it in that. And I don't think this was necessarily a bad iteration of it. I think this is a good way to, you know, keep this comp in. This is clearly like the new era comp that they like the most. Like, this era of Big Brother, this is really like their staple when it comes to their comp. I feel like you go to like Big Brother 16 and on, it's like BB Comics. Well, now it's Tiny Veto or Tiny HOH. They got to make sure they implement that every single season, and I don't think this was the worst iteration of it. But wow, they spend a considerable amount of time on this comp, and that wouldn't really be a problem if it wasn't so obvious what's going to happen, because pretty much everybody is struggling here. It's very obvious, except for really one person in the direction that things are really headed in. I was honestly really pulling for like Kimo or Rubina to win this. I wanted to see some kind of shakeup. I just wanted to see what they were really going to do when they had power. Kimo just came off of veto. I really wanted to see him win an HOH, but ultimately we get to the results, and like I said, it's really not much of a competition. There's really only one person that is a steady lead throughout all of this, and would you know, it's MJ. Once again, MJ has won HOH and has now secured her spot in the Final 4. Look, I mean, good for MJ. Like, generally, it really is great to see that she actually has become this comp beast of sorts. You know, way back a couple, like like, like back in, I would say when Tucker was still here, she was saying some along the lines of like, I am the comp beast of the season. Everybody was laughing about it. Well, now she actually is becoming the comp beast of the season. And I would argue she's even more of a comp beast than Tucker was. And that's not something I thought that I would say this season, because for a while it just seemed like the HOHs and vetoes were going to different people all the time. But now it seems like nobody can win a comp unless your name is MJ or Chelsie. Like, legitimately, that's what it feels like at this point, and you just got to get to a point where you kind of just have to be happy for her. The fact that she's been able to rack up this many comps, and again, with different skill sets. That's what's impressive about this, is that these are all similar to Tucker, different skill sets. These are not the same kind of things over and over again. Some have been a little more physical, some have been more strategic, some have been a little bit more mental, and I think that's really, some of them have been more trivia based. Like, I think it's really great to see MJ actually win this comp, despite my frustrations with her as a player, and trust me, there's more this week. I was definitely happy to see her ultimately win this, but also figured, okay, this week is probably going to go in a super predictable direction, and we'll talk about that very soon. All right, so as usual, I'm now going to go ahead and just talk about MJ's plans for the week, and it's basically the same as last week, is that she wants to try to set herself up as best she can for the end, which at this point really just means she wants to set up Chelsie as well as she can for the end, because similar to last week, while this isn't as, I think, catastrophic of a week as last week was for MJ, she's still really not doing what's best for herself. I will say she does have the right idea multiple times this week. It's just, again, the way that she ends up going about it is just so disappointing. Like, I really do think MJ could have corrected the mistakes she made last week and really just start to recognize, like, what she needs to do for herself, and she still isn't able to do that. She goes right to Chelsie and is celebrating, despite the fact that MJ was freaking out last week at the, like, right before the double eviction that she was gonna go. She didn't go, and, I mean, look, this is great for Chelsie. I think the fact that Chelsie didn't end up sending her out, now MJ's, like, fully back on her side, and it just seems like she's willing to pretend that last week it didn't happen at all, when it very much did. I've seen a lot of people try to defend the decision that MJ made last week, and I think it's very easy to just see it as, yes, it was a terrible, yes, it ended up working out for her, but it still was no less a terrible decision that really could have been so much worse for her game, and really has lessened, I think, any sort of agency she had for herself, because now all she really can do is just constantly advocate for herself and Chelsie. There is a moment here where Chelsie basically says that she actually does want to take MJ to Final 2, which was a big shock to me, but I think it really does come down to the fact that MJ is just somebody that I think she feels a little bit better against, and also I think that that Final 2 would actually be the most exciting right now, because MJ is so confident that she's playing her own game and that she isn't just doing what Chelsie wants, and she constantly says this throughout the week. And to have her against Chelsie, and Chelsie basically say that she orchestrated everything, I mean, that could be just so much fun to watch, and it's one of those things where, like, I just kind of need to see it happen. Like, the idea of an MJ and Chelsie Final 2, I think would be really fun, just to see MJ so overly confident and Chelsie just kind of credit everything that she did, discredit everything that she did and give herself credit instead. I think that would just be a lot of fun to watch. But yeah, apparently this is now Chelsea's plan. She wants to take MJ to Final 2. I've seen some people question the validity of this DR, whether or not this was sincere, if she's just lying to us. I am inclined to believe that at this point, Chelsie is content with going with either MJ or Cam. I think right now she's thinking MJ, but I do think that that could potentially change. She is definitely allowed to change her mind, and I don't think anything is, like, set in stone yet, but I think right now she's feeling like, yeah, I could take MJ to the end. Why not? That would be a very good route for me to take, and I feel like that would be a great route for Chelsie to take. Not to say that her and Cam also wouldn't be really good for her, but I think her and MJ is probably the best chance where she kind of ends up winning unanimously. I don't think MJ has nearly that many people on her side, although we will talk about that a little bit later. And she even gives herself credit in this DR where she talks about how, like, yeah, I controlled all her HOHs. I've had more power than when I was in power. And I'm like, yes, this is exactly what Chelsie needs to do at the end. So again, it really makes me feel like this is why she wants to take MJ to the end of this game, because she knows exactly how MJ has played this game. She's been by her pretty much every step of the way ever since she really started to include MJ more in things. I think where it gets a little murky is like the beginning of the game when MJ was kind of like finding allies still, but now that she's like fully brought MJ to her side, now it's like they've worked in lockstep pretty much throughout the entire game with MJ reporting everything back to Chelsie. It kind of is just the perfect, the perfect outcome for Chelsie, which means at this point, it probably will happen because Chelsie just keeps getting her way, and I just have to be impressed at this point, like I've been saying all season. Okay, so the only other real thing to talk about, and this is really where things could potentially get interesting, is in MJ's conversation with Rubina, because at this point, she knows she's putting Kimo and Rubina up. Kimo, at this point, is very likely her target. But Rubina has a little bit of information that she wants to share with MJ, and she basically tells her that, when Chelsie was HOH, she did kind of tell Rubina that she would be okay with MJ going, and that there was a chance that she would potentially have, renommed her. But here's the thing. I think that, similar to Leah last week, she absolutely has the right idea here. I think, unlike Leah, this is absolutely the person you need to be talking to. She has this information, and I like the fact that she is not just holding this information. She actually is doing some of this information and is actively trying to now target Chelsie. The problem is, at this particular point, the way that she ends up going about it, it just isn't really all that effective, because Rubina does not outright say that Chelsie wanted to target you. What she does instead is basically say that if it was basically if the veto would have been used, that there was a good chance that if Rubina had won HOH, that she actually wanted her to put up MJ. And again, I think that this just isn't as effective. I think what Rubina should have said is she should have said this, but she also should have followed it up with just talking about how Chelsie is somebody that nobody's able to beat in the end. Nobody's able to, recognize, nobody's able to really advocate against Chelsie, because Chelsie has played such a fantastic game. And so I like the fact that Rubina's eyes are opened. I think it's great. I've been saying all season for the past couple weeks now that I don't understand why Rubina and Kimo won't recognize, what's going on. And I think it's good that Rubina is recognizing this. But again, she's not being as outright as she needs to be here. She's not being as upfront as she needs to be. And I really chalk up most of that to just how passive everyone has been playing this season. And I think the biggest reason that Rubina is not able to do much with this information, despite MJ being kind of an idiot this week, as she's been the past couple weeks, is the fact that she just isn't clear enough with this information. She needed to say to MJ that Chelsie would have put you up. Not just that she would have gone Rubina to do it, but that she herself probably would have put her up as well. She even mentioned it to Kimo, and I just don't understand why she doesn't do that. But also, this is MJ, and MJ, had a couple choices. I think her best choice would have been to hold on to this information and really just wait to do something about it until the right time. Give herself a bit of a pause, maybe put up Kimo and Cam. That was something that she was potentially thinking about. She even mentions to Rubina that, like, if the veto is used, that she very well might just end up using it on her, which, again, I'll come back to that. Remember, she tells her, like, if I win the veto, I'm likely going to use it on you, and that was kind of her plan here. But instead of her deciding to do anything with this information that could help her, she goes right to Chelsie. Of course she does. She goes right to Chelsie, and Chelsie, again, works her magic, does a great job of just kind of deflecting any of this, saying that, well, yes, of course I told Rubina that this is what's going on. I think, again, the way that Chelsie frames this is perfect, because she basically says that, well, yeah, I told Rubina to go after you because I didn't want it to be me. We were kind of just talking about potential potential options, and Rubina suggested the fact that like Rubina was the one really pushing this. And again, I think it's just really just incredible work here from Chelsie. The way that she is able to throw the scent off of her so easily. Now, to be fair, this is MJ. It's really not that hard at this point to get her off your sights and convince her that you're still with her and that you're still in her corner. It's really not that hard to do that, considering just how great of a job Chelsie has done, but also just how snowed MJ is at this point, and how even when she has this moment of doubting Chelsie, she needs that confirmation directly from Chelsie. She can't possibly consider that Chelsie might be lying to her, but again, I think it's because Chelsie is just such an incredible liar. She's so good at being able to, twist things in such a way to make herself seem innocent, to make it seem like she wasn't the one pushing it, when in reality, she was talking to Rubina about this. She did talk about how Makensy was doing too much and how she felt like she needed to be the one to go after her, and that she wanted her to win HOH so she could, target MJ and get her out of here, and that MJ's winning too many comps, and that, she just feels like she's pushing too hard for things, and she, just really doesn't know how to handle her anymore. And so, again, the way that Chelsea's able to shut all of that down is really brilliant work, but also, come on, MJ, it's Final Five. What are you thinking at this point? If I'm in MJ's position, any note that I get of this being a potential conversation, it's gonna send alarm bells in my head. It's gonna make me think for a second that, maybe this is not the direction I need to be going in. Chelsie, is clearly someone that Rubina wants out. I want Rubina to be on my side. Why not put Chelsie up at that point? There's just so many avenues she could have gone this week, but of course, she doesn't really end up going in the direction that she should, because again, it's MJ, and really, again, just shows me that she has learned almost nothing from last week, and I think a lot of it is just because she has now convinced herself that because she got through that double eviction, that she's fine, and that any of her sort of paranoia was simply just that, and she really has nothing else to worry about. And again, I really do credit Chelsie, because Chelsie even says to MJ, if I would have targeted you, it would have been during the double eviction. So it's really great work from Chelsie. But again, the fact that MJ is just so easily able to buy into it, I feel like Chelsie could have literally just said that, yes, I was doing it, and MJ would have just passed it off as, well, okay, I don't believe you. Chelsie could have not handled this so well, and I think MJ still would have bought it, but I do think that because Chelsie has managed MJ so well all season, I think that's why MJ is able to buy into it as quickly as she is. So again, it really is credit to Chelsie. It's still also really bad gameplay from MJ, but it is credit to, a lot of credit goes to Chelsie here and just how she's been able to do this. So the only other thing to really talk about is that there is a moment here where Kimo is kind of trying to talk to Cam about game, and Cam isn't really doing much of anything. He's not really opening up, which it's kind of funny the way they portray this in the show, because I feel like a lot of the time it comes across the other way, where it's Cam's kind of not, both of them are not really talking game with each other, and if Kimo does, he talks about game but then goes right back to singing. That's kind of been his MO throughout this entire season, so I think it was kind of funny the way that they kind of played that here. But basically, he talks about how there's only 2 guys left in the game, and really kind of insinuates that he wants to go to the end with Cam. He wants to take him there, and you can see that Cam is unsure if this is really the move. He does feel that Kimo's being a bit too subtle, and that he's really got to put a stop to it, and they kind of discuss how they need to win power to help themselves in the game. And look, I said this last week, I feel like the one thing that Cam does have over Chelsie is that he has closer relationships with Kimo and Rubina. He's really done a good job of just gravitating towards them. They're kind of the people he goes to whenever he's stressed out, whenever he's annoyed by a conversation. They are the people he goes to kind of let off some steam. I'll be straight up. I don't like the way I explained the next part in my original recording, so I'm just going to go ahead and re-record this as a audio recording, but I feel like if Cam was just a little bit more self-interested of a player, he would recognize that going to 3 with like Kimo and Rubina actually is the move for him, and I really do think that could have potentially been a possibility. He could have pushed to get Chelsie out, but he's not going to get Chelsie out because Chelsie has just done such a good job of strategizing with him and making him feel like he's, a part of her, a valuable, like, part of her game and things like that, and that she has to be a part of his game as well. I think she's done some really great work there, but because of that, Cam is like just not recognizing that this kind of has to be the move, that him working with Rubina especially, I think should absolutely be a potential final 2 for him. The fact that he hasn't recognized that, I think, is just really a testament to how great Chelsie has played, but it's also a testament to how I think while Cam has put in a lot of effort, I think a lot of it is the bare minimum. There is more that he could be doing, and this is a very good example that I like the work he's put in with Kimo Rubina, but it doesn't really feel like he's fully utilized it, and I think that this was maybe an opportunity for him to do that. But again, I respect the attempt from Kimo to at least try to do something here. It's certainly a lot more than he's going to do the rest of this week, so I will definitely give him that. But we do get to the nomination ceremony here, and really no surprise here at all. It does end up being Kimo and Rubina, with Kimo being the targets, and yeah, really not much to talk about. I think everybody expected it to go in this direction. Kimo's been the target for weeks now, and it kind of seemed like at this point that it was pretty set in stone that that's the direction things were going to go in, and again, just really not much else to discuss here. But aside from everything we get aside from that little bit of strategy, the rest of this episode is comprised almost entirely of filler. There is an elongated montage of Kimo and him eating, which, yes, that's been a pretty consistent running gag throughout this season of just Kimo and how he, constantly smacks his food and like slurps ramen and things like that. And, if you've been on the feeds, you've had the misfortune of listening to this stuff up close. It's definitely not been that pleasant, to say the least. So I like that they actually did show a montage of it and just how annoyed everyone is getting as a result. I thought it was funny they finally showed that. And then there's also this one moment where they like officially close down the Have Not Room. Look, the Have Not Room has not been relevant for weeks now, so this segment really did nothing for me. They're doing it to the tune of Amazing Grace. I knew eventually they were gonna have some segment of them singing. I just didn't think that it would be this. This has not been that relevant. There's been so many other songs that they've been coming up with throughout the past couple weeks. This was like the last thing I expected, but again, it just really shows how much they are starving for content in this episode when they really just have almost nothing to show. So that's really it when it comes to Sunday's episode. Let's get into tonight's, because there's at least a little bit more to talk about. It was a 2-hour episode, and this is what I will say to this, is that I don't think that this needed to be 2 hours, obviously. Yes, we had the veto. Yes, they had to get to the eviction. Yes, there was a lot of things to pack into that point. But I don't understand why they couldn't have just done the full week in this 2-hour episode, because again, Sunday's episode just felt like such a waste in that way. If you had just done like 1 2-hour episode of the final 5, I actually do think that would have been enough, because I think you would have covered everything. Whereas here, again, they really just end up padding things out in a pretty big way, and it kind of just does end up feeling like 2 separate episodes. Like the first half of the 2 hours feels drastically different from the second, and I think, again, I would really just chalk that up to the fact that, again, they don't have a Wednesday episode, and it feels like they're trying to pack too much into one episode. And they've done this before. Like Celebrity Big Brother did this a lot when they would do multiple evictions per week. A lot of the time they would have the Friday episode be pretty packed with stuff, but again, it was pretty early on in the game. It was an entire round, like it was entire rounds worth of stuff, so it felt necessary to have those 2 hours. This just didn't feel that necessary. There's no scenario where I feel like we needed 2 hours. Like 90 minutes, okay, I can get 90 minutes, but a 2-hour episode, it just really felt like too much, and there's quite a bit that ends up bringing this down. So what to even talk about in this episode before we get to the veto? Because quite honestly, there's not much. There's really not much before the veto. There's some stuff that happens after the veto, but before the veto, there's really not that much here, where there's a scene where Makensy is talking to Chelsie, and they're talking about how if one of them wins the veto, that they maybe are planning to take Rubina off, and then they would put Cam up as a replacement. And MJ kind of wants to do this to repair the trust of, where it should kind of just repair trust between them. And again, the big thing I will say about this part of the week is that we've now gotten to a point of the season where we're at Final Five and everyone's minds are just constantly racing. I think there's just a lot of overthinking going on this week. And look, MJ's done a lot of overthinking in general. But I think this is one of those examples where I get it. You want to have Rubina on your side. You really want this all-girls Final Three to be a thing. I think that's all really great. The problem is, Rubina's not your target. Rubina was never your target. And you saving her with the veto when she's already a pawn isn't really gonna do all that much. The way that you proved her you're on her side is by just voting Kimo out and having her be a pawn and tell her that she's good. You don't really need to save her with the veto. And so, while again, I think it was a nice gesture, if she had put up Rubina and then renommed Cam as the target, then I think this might have actually been effective. But because she just wants to use a veto to repair trust between them, when Rubina is obviously annoyed with MJ, again, it just seems kind of unnecessary. So I don't really understand why she felt that needed to happen. Chelsie also is really not down for this, and I don't really blame her, because while yes, Kimo is the target, she's also not at all counting out Rubina. She knows that Rubina has now openly been saying her name, and this is entirely the problem with MJ telling Chelsie, is that now you have now given Chelsie an opportunity to change your target this week. Even though you wanted to be Kimo, Chelsie has every right now to direct this at Rubina, because Rubina was so openly targeting her in that way. And Chelsea's well aware of this, and Chelsie can now use this against you. So now again, you are the only person she is the only person that you have. She did it with Leah last week, she's doing it with Rubina this week. And the fact that MJ can't see it is just insane to me. But again, it really just speaks to how well Chelsie is at manipulating her and how well she is at getting her to just believe her every word. I think it's just really brilliant work, and I totally understand why Chelsie would be so, adamant on possibly going after Rubina here when she is such a obstacle for her, when she is somebody that is coming at her in that way. You can kind of understand that. So Chelsie does go to Cam, kind of warns him about the fact that, hey, MJ's kind of planning to put you up, but she kind of dances around that, doesn't really tell him that MJ's putting her up, but more so that he might potentially be an option and that he needs to lock in for the veto, and that she's really worried that Rubina is in MJ's ear. And, I like that Cam even says in this DR that, yeah, Chelsie is overthinking. Now, he's not right about this. Rubina is openly targeting Chelsie at this point. Both her and Kimo, in fact, are openly targeting Chelsie at this point. They didn't show it in the episode, but, the two of them were finally, figuring it out, that, who's aligned where and why MJ ended up not putting up Rubina. So, again, just really ended up backfiring for MJ, but again, really great work from Chelsie. She really wants to see Cam win this veto, and we'll talk about how that all does go down in a little bit. And look, I will say, I was honestly really down for a Cam veto. I wanted to see what he would do in that scenario. Would he pull off one of Kimo or Rubina? These are two people that he's very close with. He's formed genuine friendships with them. Would he actually try to save one of them here? I wanted to see that scenario take place. One, because I thought it would be the most entertaining, but also because I just felt like, I felt like this was the one chance of the veto potentially being used this week, and seeing Chelsie go up and then seeing the potential of what could really happen there. I mean, there was a lot of possibilities. Aside from that, the only other thing to talk about is that, again, there's a lot of filler here, to the point where they even show a moment of MJ and Rubina doing a tortilla challenge, which is literally from August. This happened forever ago, and you can tell that they just had to go deep into the archives to try to find some kind of filler content. And again, the fact that they are finally showing this, it really just shows you just how unnecessary it was to have this be a 2-hour episode when they just quite literally had almost nothing to show. But we get to the veto. It does end up being BB Comics, and I will say two things real quick about BB Comics. One is that the comics themselves, I think, were easily after a few seasons of just constant duds and like really easy jokes and comics that just didn't make sense, mostly just puns of people's names. I actually thought these comics were really good. I thought, they were actually really well thought out. They actually had, they felt like they put a lot more efforts into it. They made sure that the house guest comic was something that was relevant to the season, with like Brooklyn's, for example, and like the charcuterie board, or Angela and her being the radiation, queen or whatever, and her holding Matt and things like that. Matt's being Crazy Eyes, or, someone like, say, Joseph and his being about Dr. Will. I mean, Tucker's being about the instigator. Like, these were much more I think there was just so much more detail put into these than they have in previous seasons. There are some comics here that definitely are a little bit lazy. I don't really understand Chelsea's that well. I don't really like MJ's. Something like Lisa's is like very basic, but it's kind of what you expect with like the glitter and things like that. But then, again, you have creative ones like Kenny's, for example, which, yes, it's really fucking weird and gross, but you know what? I'll take it over a lot of the just bland ones we got. We don't have a comic of someone just going to the mall or something like that. Like, there actually is more effort put into these, and I definitely will give them that. They're not great by any means, but compared to what we've gotten in other seasons, they're mostly relevant to what's been going on in the game, or they resemble like a nickname or something, and not just like a very basic trait about their personality. And I will definitely I will definitely praise that and prefer that a hell of a lot more than just how generic and lazy so many of them have been as of late. Unfortunately, though, the segment itself takes up such a large chunk of this first hour that it's the majority that it just felt so insufferable. Like, generally, I was just so annoyed by how much time they were taking up just pointing out all the differences. I mean, I get it. Like, it's a spot the difference comp, and one comp is different than the other, and one comp, Angela's holding Matt, in the other comp, she's holding fucking Kenny or something. In one comp, Brooklyn's eating from a charcuterie board, and the other one, she's eating pasta salad. Like, I get the differences here. In one, there's, in one comp, Quinn has, like, brown hair, and the other comp, he has blonde hair. Like, I don't care. I don't care about these differences. You're spending so much time on it, and it just made for such uninteresting television. I get it that you need to pad it out, but you did not need to spend so much time on BB Comics. I feel like they are slowly turning BB Comics into what could potentially be its own episode. They spend so much time on it. Now, it wasn't as bad as last season, where it was an HOH comp and there were like 8 people competing, and we had like 8 people say all these differences. Like, at least this time it was 5, but it still felt like an eternity. Like, this was like a good like 20 minutes. This was a good like 20-minute segment. No interruptions whatsoever. Again, just really bad, and it really is the main thing that does bring this episode down, aside again from just how little is going on gameplay-wise. This really just took up so much of this portion of the episode, and it really just ended up weighing everything down. I guess the only other thing to say about the comics veto is that I talked about last week how I've really been impressed by how equitable all the comps have been this season, and so I guess because of the fact that they have just done such a good job at improving things and making sure that things were keeping pretty much every physical comp like out of reach this season. There really hasn't been that many. I thought the zip line was just not going to be there, but no, it's still there. I get it. It's a part of this comp. If you get rid of it, it probably goes a lot quicker, but at the same time, like, you don't really need it. And I feel like if you're in a scenario where someone is not as physically fit, most of the time they're not going to do as well versus the person that is, which is why MJ was able to crush it in the way that she was. But also Cam struggled, and he's just as physically fit. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not even thinking straight at this point. But maybe I just don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But I don't know. Maybe I just feel like it's one of those things that maybe they should have gotten rid of. It wasn't a huge deal, but I was just a little bit surprised in a season where where they have been making such a huge effort to reduce any sort of physical comps whatsoever that they still implemented the zip line. I would have thought they removed that, but they didn't. It's fine. I don't have a ton to say about it. I'm just a little bit surprised that it ultimately was still intact within this comp. We do get to the results of this competition, and ultimately, once again, really shouldn't have been surprised. MJ wins veto again, which is insane. She's now gone basically 2 weeks in a row having full power, and I was just really hoping that maybe she would actually try to make some kind of move here. She would actually try to maybe turn things around, and it seemed like maybe that was going to happen because there's a scene with everyone just kind of talking about their strategies for the comp, and Cam basically ends up letting out that while he was doing the comp, he essentially got tired and decided to take a break. Yeah, definitely not the right move here at all. Look, I'm really pulling for Cam to win some kind of comp just because at this point, like, the guy's been trying, like, he really has been trying, but the fact that he literally took a break during this comp, it's getting harder and harder to root for that, to actually root for that. At this point, it's kind of just feeling like he's doing it to himself. And he's really just not good at these at all. Like, it sucks that he's not able to win any of these comps, but again, the fact that he did this is both really funny, but also just really baffling to me. But what's even more baffling is what comes next, because this is then followed by both MJ and Chelsie just being so furious at Cam that he's not putting in weight, that they've basically been carrying him this entire time, that they don't really feel like he's putting in any real effort. You know, they're constantly, they're giving, he's the one receiving in that way, and it's very much become this give and take, and it gets to a point where Chelsie and MJ both convince themselves that, oh, he's not doing well in comps, he must be throwing. He's intentionally throwing in an effort to keep the both of them, to have them do all of his dirty work, and he's the one who kind of gets out with his hands clean. And again, this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying that there's just a lot of overthinking going on this week. Chelsie's even venting this to, like, the fish tank. Really funny edit. I love the sound effects during that. That was all really great, the way that was done. But yeah, I mean, you can just tell in this moment that Cam is, and what I will say to this is that I do not think MJ wanting to go after Cam is a bad move. I think actually it's a really good move. You know that Cam and Chelsie are close. This brings you fully to Chelsie, to where now she's now losing an option that's going to take her to the end. She's left with Kimo and Rubina, who probably are not going to take her to the end, but probably will take MJ to the end. It puts MJ in a much better position to where if she wanted to take out Chelsie at 4, she could. I think all of that is really great, her wanting to put up Cam, but the reasoning that it's because he's now intentionally throwing comps is, like, really fucking stupid. And while on one hand, I was like, okay, let's see where this actually goes. On the other hand, I was like, I don't really understand this move. And the fact that Chelsie also is behind this is not something that Chelsea's pushing back from and feeling like maybe this isn't the direction to go in. The fact that she's actually still thinking that this is a possibility, even having a conversation with Cam where he opens up about the fact that he is just bad at comps and he's trying, but it's just not working out for him. Chelsie still not believing him was just insane to me. Like, I don't even think Chelsie was handling this well. Like, I think Chelsea's been a very skillful player, but I think this was definitely a big misread on her end, and I think we definitely do see that here. And this is really the other big issue with this week, is that there are multiple points throughout this week where it feels like things might be potentially going in a more interesting direction. It kind of seemed like the week was going to start off with Kimo and Rubina, and I was like, oh my god, Cam's going up, because that's kind of how this season has been. Things start off, and it seems like we're headed in a very definitive conclusion, like last week with Angela going, or the week before where it was supposed to be Kimo going, and then that's not what ended up happening, or the week before that where Angela was supposed to go, or even before that where Angela was supposed to go. Like, you see what I'm getting at. Like, most of this season has been the nominees start off and they're just not that exciting, and it doesn't really feel like it's going to go in any other direction. And then someone unexpectedly wins the veto and makes a big power move, and the entire week ends up getting more exciting as a result. And it did seem like there were at least two instances this week where that might potentially be a possibility. This was the first one, but that possibility kind of just ends up fading away once Cam does have his conversation with MJ, where he basically tells her that, yeah, no, I'm just not very good at comps, and I'm not intentionally doing this. And she kind of lets him know how frustrated she is, and how he started off doing really well, but some of his order was wrong, and how he's really feeling. And as he says, he has yips in comps, and MJ is really not sure what to do here. The important thing to note here is that we don't see any campaigning from Kimo or Rubina to try to use the veto on them, and that's because it literally does not happen. There was a moment where Rubina was gonna go to MJ and talk to her, and it just did not really end up going in that direction, and it just seemed like maybe that wasn't going to be the case. So ultimately, we get to the veto ceremony, and look, this is usually where the excitement has come all season long. There has been a precedent set all the way back in week 1 that the veto gets used and the entire week changes, and for the first time this season, this is really when we knew that things were not going to be that way, when MJ ultimately does not end up using the veto here. And look, I mean, just on paper, the fact that the veto was not used is really lame, really disappointing. I think the fact the veto has been used so much, we've been so spoiled all season, the fact that it wasn't used this time, it just really is very, very saddening to see. Definitely, rip the veto. Had a good run. I'm sure it'll be used next week, but for now, it's not going to be used. It's the first time the entire season where that hasn't happened. But also, can we talk about the fact that MJ still has the veto and still cannot make the right move? Last week, she has a veto that she, 1, should not have won, 2, did not need to use and used it anyway and made the worst decision. This week, she has a veto that I think she did actually kind of need, and then has a chance to make a move that does actually benefit her in putting Cam up, and she doesn't use the veto and still is making the wrong decision. I don't know how she does it. Truly, I don't know how she does it. I would love to sit here and say that MJ is this fantastic player and she's winning all these comps and she's, playing this really great game that's helping herself. But the reality is, aside from her winning those comps, there's not really much that she's doing right at this point. Yes, obviously, it makes sense for her to trust Chelsie because of how much Chelsie has had her back, but it just seems like she constantly talks herself out of making the right move. It's like she knows that it's what she needs to do, and then she doesn't go in that direction because she is so easily convinced by Cam and Chelsie. They don't show it in the episode, but Cam and Chelsie and MJ actually had another one-on-one where MJ really got defensive with Cam, brought up how devastated she would be at herself if she wasn't pulling her weight and things like that, really just showing, kind of antagonizing him and showing him just how annoyed she is that he's not doing well in comps. And he really makes it clear that he's a team player, and you knew at that point it wasn't going to go through, but I just really wanted to see it happen. They kept talking about it. It seemed like this was going to be an interesting thing. I obviously didn't want to see Cam go. I've liked Cam a lot as the game has gone on, and I think, every week he's shown more and more potential, but I just was really hoping that this would be the thing that just kind of builds a little bit more intrigue, a little more excitement, but ultimately doesn't really end up going much of anywhere. Seems like it's going to be Kimo, and that's the direction that things are headed in at this point. But make no mistake, MJ should have used this veto. She literally told Rubina early in the week that she was going to use the veto if she won, and then ultimately didn't. Rubina is hopeful at this point that she's going to use it on her, doesn't really plan to talk to MJ because she feels like she has MJ in her corner, and then she doesn't use the veto. I don't understand this move. If you wanted to keep Rubina safe, you should have just done what you said you were going to do. Like I said, I think it was an unnecessary move, but telling Rubina you're going to save her is a net positive. It gets Rubina on your side. If Rubina wins HOH or veto, I know she doesn't really win comps that aren't AI Arena, but if perchance she does win, she's not going to be looking at MJ. She's going to be looking at Chelsie, and MJ just saved her. So again, I just feel like this was 100% the right move for MJ, and yet she again ended up making the wrong move. It's just insane to me that it went in that direction once again. So that was the first attempt in the week potentially getting a little bit more interesting and not going in such a predictable direction. But then out of nowhere, there's a second attempt, and it's not at all what you would expect to happen. Although maybe you did kind of expect it, because there's this conversation between MJ and Rubina, where Rubina kind of asks MJ, like, is she, and Chelsea's there as well, of like, does she still think that, do they both still want this, women thing to happen? They've been talking since like Tucker was in the game that they want to see a women final six. It hasn't really come to fruition. Obviously, it seemed like there was a point where that was going to be the case, but then when you have T-Core and Leah and Angela go out, I don't think that's going to happen, but they want to try to rectify that by having the three girls at the end. Chelsie is interested in this, but she also is still a little bit dubious because she knows that Rubina wants to send her out, but she also wants as many options as possible. Well, MJ is very much behind this. She wants this to be the final three, and so I like that there is some sort of disagreement between the two of them, but that Chelsie is going to eventually reel MJ in and get her to recognize that no, it needs to be you, me, and Cam at the end. That she's going to get her to come to that conclusion, but we'll see where that ends up going next week. But for right now, it does seem like this is MJ's possible final three. But basically, Chelsie then goes right to Cam and kind of lets him know that MJ is now playing both sides, and this is really why, like I said, MJ really should have used that veto on Rubina, because Chelsie immediately uses this against her, tells Cam that she's worried that MJ's playing both sides of the house, that there's potential that her and Rubina are really close, and this really starts to concern Cam. And so he has this conversation with Kimo, which actually ends up being a lot more effective than most of his conversations, most of Kimo's work throughout this week. It's probably the most effective thing he does, where he basically tells Cam that, like, hey, I need you in this game. I want to go to the end with you. I feel like the two of us would be really good. Like, there's, this possible girls alliance. Now we need to try to team up. And it seems like Cam is fully behind this. It's like, oh, wait a second. There's a possibility that these three girls are working together. And if I don't do something, I could potentially just end up being outnumbered. And the three girls are going to end up making it to the end. That is very much a possibility. And yeah, you can see that this is like really sketching Cam out. And so he goes to Chelsie and they have this conversation. And mind you, this conversation was literally last night. Like, that's how uninteresting the majority of this week was. I thought for sure, like, it was pretty obvious what was going to happen, but Waffle Wednesday is going to Waffle Wednesday. And that's exactly what ended up happening here, where they have this moment where they're talking about the possibility of keeping Kimo, and Chelsie honestly does seem like she's behind it. She has a conversation with Kimo, and Kimo tells her that he kind of wants to potentially he would actually keep her in the game. He'd be targeting MJ. He wouldn't be going after her. And she's thinking, okay, maybe this is actually a good thing for me. She doesn't realize that Kimo has also mentioned potentially coming after her, but Rubina has. And this is why we'll say this, is that yet again, I don't really think this makes a lot of sense for Chelsie. For Cam, absolutely. I think this is a great move for Cam. Cam has Kimo on his side. Kimo has told him he is a possibility to go to the end with him. The two of them are very close. Cam ends up in a scenario where if Rubina goes, he now has three people that all probably want to take me. I'm not sure if MJ does, but Chelsie will. Kimo will. It's one extra option that potentially wants to take him to the end, whereas Rubina wants to work with, whereas Rubina's clearly in this for MJ and Chelsie, and not really so much for him, so I think it's really good for Cam. It's not really that great for Chelsie, because yes, obviously, you've kept Kimo in, who said he's going to keep you, but a big reason for that is because she also believes that Rubina is going to win, and that Rubina is going to target her, but Kimo literally just won a veto, and also it could very well end up happening again. The person that wins veto next week basically has all the power. So again, I think this really is just Chelsie overthinking at this point. It really just didn't make a lot of sense to me, especially when she talks to MJ, and MJ is like generally pissed at her. Like, this is the most angry MJ has been at Chelsie pretty much the entire season. She has this, DR of sorts where she's just venting out her frustrations, and At this point, I don't really blame her. I really do think she should have just used the veto. That could have all been avoided, but alas, I really do not blame, but regardless, I really do not blame MJ here because I understand, her frustration. She thought that Kimo was going to go. She was told all week it was going to be Kimo, and now the target is shifting to Rubina. And again, Cam and Chelsie want to kind of take advantage of the fact that MJ doesn't have a lot of power here, and there isn't really much she can do to turn this around. So yeah, it seemed like at this point, okay, this might actually be a definitive possibility. I don't really understand the move here from Chelsie. I don't really understand why you would do what's best for Cam and not for you. Yes, maybe it doesn't super affect you, but I think at the final 3, it could potentially be a possibility. If you go into a final 4 where MJ goes, I think that's really dangerous for Chelsie. Kimo's not going to take you. Cam will probably end up taking, will probably take you, but I also could see him being swayed into taking Kimo. It just didn't really seem like it was the greatest move. But then we get to the eviction, and before we get to the eviction, there is some goodbye message. There is some messages from home for the final 5. I actually like getting to see this on the episode. I feel like we don't often get to see this on the episodes anymore, and it just feels like a staple of Big Brother, just something we're used to seeing at the end of the game, so it was cool to actually get to see it here. Not before they do this whole song for Julie that they created. I was shocked that they actually got to sing it on the show. They've been talking for weeks now about wanting to do this song, and they finally did, and I thought that was really funny. Now it's all going to be about, are they actually going to get to sing about the summers that we'll remember on the finale? Because that's something else that Kimo and Rubina have heavily hinted at wanting to do, but are they actually going to get to do it? I guess we'll find out. But anyway, let's get into this eviction. There's not a lot to talk about because the pitches are just very cut and dry. Kimo does his usual, just talking about how doing what's best for your game and keeping him in, and then Rubina kind of does the same thing. Not really a lot to talk about in terms of the pitches here, but we get to the votes, and at this point I thought, okay, Rubina's gonna go, and that's kind of the direction that things are heading in. But then the vote happens, and Cam goes to vote, and it ends up actually being Kimo. Kimo was actually the person that Cam ends up voting here. We go to Chelsie. Chelsie also votes out Kimo, and Kimo leaves. And it's like, oh my god, in a week that seems so definitive that Kimo was going to leave, they actually made me think for a second that things were actually going to change and that Rubina was going to be the target. And what I think ultimately probably happened here was a couple things. One, Kimo just has not been putting in a lot of effort with campaigning this week. He did have those moments that you saw, but those were literally his only moments throughout the entire week. Most of the time, he's sitting around. He's, he's doing his usual singing. He's doing a bunch of skits. He's talking about, stuff with Rubina and what they're going to do after the season. He's talking to other people about just memories and regrets in the house and things like that. And he's not really focusing a lot on campaigning, whereas Rubina, no, she's not doing that much either, but she's at least putting in more effort. And I think what happened is that Chelsie correctly recognized that, this is just not the right move for her. This was not the direction that she needed to go in, and once again, Chelsie gets her way here. Chelsie makes sure that what she wants to happen is what happens, and I think it's good that she was able to recognize this, because I think if she didn't, it might have been the first time that Chelsie makes the most suboptimal move, that makes a suboptimal move for her game. So I think it was actually really good that she recognized what she needed to do here, that getting rid of Kimo was the correct move, and ultimately, that is what ends up happening. But we do get to Kimo's exit interview, and, not a ton to talk about. He does talk about the fact that it's been a lot of fun playing the game, and he does talk about the fact of he knows why he was kind of voted out here, and that he was because he was going to win the game, but also because of how small the numbers are and that it's really tough. Julie kind of asked him if Cam made a mistake, and he thinks that he did, but he's going to respect whatever decisions were made. And then Julie also asked him about the Friends Alliance and kind of just what ended up happening, and I think Kimo kind of nailed on the head here, where he said, yeah, we all just became super tight, and it was just so visible in that way. There wasn't a way for us to separate. Everybody knew that we were friends. Everybody knew that we were constantly working together, and we just weren't able to get away from that. And I think that's the best way to sum it up. He says that friendship really was the greatest alliance of them all. So yeah, ultimately, I mean, look, I've said what I really needed to about Kimo. I think Kimo as a player, had a lot of potential. He came into the game and he did have a genuine sense of drive. Yes, he was quite passive. Yes, he was a little bit too closed off in the beginning. But I think once he got off that block in week 1 and he really started to strategize more with T-Core, there was a lot of potential. There was a lot of drive in what he was doing. He was very clear on what he wanted his goal to be. The way he handled things on the Cedric round, I still am very impressed by. I said the same thing with T-Core. I said this, I said it with T-Core. I'll say the same thing with Kimo. And I think that he really just put a lot of effort into the game until Tucker left. And it felt like after Tucker left and that alliance dissolved, Kimo was just never able to really get his head back into the game. He was always focused on just talking to T-Core and Rubina, wasn't really trying to make plans outside of it, and as a result, the game was just constantly happening around him. It never really felt like he was super involved with anything. When he was, it didn't really last all that long. There were possibilities he had, but he just didn't take advantage of them, and I think Kimo knows this. He talked a lot about it throughout the week, where he said, like, hey, I wish we pulled Leah into more things, and look, who was the person on this very channel who said that Leah should have gone to Kimo, T-Core, and Rubina? It's like, it was right there, and Kimo knows that that's the move that should have happened. He should have tried to recruit Leah earlier on and pull her in as a 4th, and he ultimately didn't do that. He talks about Quinn and how he wishes that he had stuck closer to him because he knew that Quinn actually did have his back in the end. So again, I think there's just, he talked a little bit more about, I think, when it comes to Angela, wishing that him and Angela were a lot closer. Like, I think there are so many things that Kimo could have done, but very similar to T-Core, I think even worse than T-Core, he's just such a passive player. And I wouldn't even say passive. For a while, it felt kind of non-existent. Like, he would just go on the block, not have much of a reaction to it. It seemed like maybe he had new life in the game when he ultimately was saved in the round that Joseph went. But again, it's just kind of felt like since then, he's just kind of been drawing dead. And I hate to say that because I really like Kimo as a person. I think he's such a nice guy. I really just like his passion and his love for everything. I enjoy his goofy moments with like T-Core and Rubina, the songs and things like, him constantly singing and things like that. I think he's just a really fun and just really likable presence. So it just became very frustrating when he was just playing so terribly in the way that he was, because I really just felt he had so much potential in this game and he just wasn't able to fully recognize it. And I think Kimo is somebody where if you give him another chance in the game, I think he does things a lot differently, but I also don't know if he's gonna ever get that chance. I think, again, his real move that needed to be made after the Cedric vote was really trying to figure out, how am I going to pivot after that? Maybe he should have tried to go towards this Tucker side and pull in Leah and pull in, an MJ, and that could have maybe been a lot different. Maybe that side of the house, he could have actually ran things and they would have been a much more dominant position. But what ended up happening is that after the Cedric move, yes, you had that alliance of 6th Avenue, but because he didn't push back the round where Angela went up, ultimately he just kind of let that alliance dissolve, and I think that it really was a mistake for him. There's so much more that he could have done, and I also don't think 6th Avenue needed to be the end. I think, again, he could have easily pulled Leah in, and the 4 of them could have been solid. You have somebody on your side that is winning. You are not winning. Leah is winning stuff. That was your opportunity. You pull in Angela as well. Oh my god, you now have a solid 5. Like, there's just, you could have pulled in Joseph. Like, you could have pulled Quinn back to you. Like, there's so much more that you could have done here. But ultimately, I think he just really just got so checked out of the game because I think he just wasn't able to figure out his path. And yes, I think when you're put on the block so much, it really does kind of put you in this state where you feel like you're on borrowed time, but you need to try to do something to get yourself out of that, dig yourself out of that hole. And Kimo just ultimately didn't do that. I think he had an opportunity on Leah's HOH, and it really did seem like that was going to go somewhere, but ultimately it didn't. And I think it really did end up hurting him in the end. So yeah, I mean, I think he should have advocated more for T-Core and Rubina at that that point. I think he should have put a lot more effort into wanting to go after Chelsie, want to go after Cam. I like how determined he was to do that this week, but ultimately it was just too late. Like, I think that's the best way to sum it up. If he had done this on Leah's HOH, or if he had done this even on like Quinn's second HOH, I think it could have been super effective. But because he did it now, it just didn't really end up working. So I think there's a string of things that Kimo could have done, and he just ultimately didn't end up doing them. So it just kind of got him sitting here. So very similar to T-Core, although like I said, I think T-Core is a better player without Kimo and Rubina, whereas Kimo, I think ultimately his biggest enemy is himself, and that's why he was in the position that he was. And I think that if he had just done any of the things that he wanted to do, he could have generally been such a force in this game, but ultimately that's just not how things ended up going. But yeah, Kimo ends up going here. It feels like at this point it's been like so like this delayed outcome, like something that we thought was going to happen week after week, and then he was constantly saved. And to see him go here, it is kind of sad, because I do actually think Kimo could have actually ended up winning this game, despite all of what I just said. I do actually think there was a position where he could have won. If he's against Cam, I think he very well could have won this game. He had a really good arc of him being saved constantly, of him being the first person ever to change somebody's vote based on a speech. Like, that has to count for something. Him winning the first AI arena, him constantly finding ways to, survive evictions. Like, he absolutely could have won this game. And so, yeah, I was definitely a little sad to see him go here, despite the fact that I do think that it was kind of just inevitable that it was eventually going to go in this direction. So it sucks to see Kimo go, because I really do think he was a fun personality in the house, but I can't really say that game-wise I'm really all that surprised, just because I think just as the weeks went on, he became less and less relevant. He seemed to have so little knowledge or care of what was going on, and this week when he finally needed to do something and started to kind of see the game around him, he ultimately just wasn't able to stop playing this very sort of lackadaisical, complacent game that he has, and it just didn't end up working out for him. I think the fact that he didn't put in effort with certain people, throughout this entire game, it really just all ended up catching up to him, and there really wasn't much of anything that he could do about it. So yeah, sucks to see him go, but can't really say that it's all that surprising. So before we do get to talking about the Final Four, the last thing to really discuss here is that we do actually get to see the jury house, and there wasn't much here ultimately. There's not a ton to really talk about. The big things to really discuss here is when it comes to T-Core, she is really pushing for Chelsie to win the game. She understands, the game that she's played, how she's kind of insulated, been so well insulated in the house, and all the different things that she's been able to do. So she really recognizes it. Quinn really recognizes it as well. It seems like Leah is a little bit more inclined to vote for MJ. She feels like MJ's played this really strong underdog game, and this is something that people have talked about, is that is definitely something that I think is going to help MJ, is that she does have that story. But again, it's like, what did she do with those wins? I think that you get a few more people in there that are able to hype up Chelsie, but I do think Leah could ultimately be turned around. Angela says she doesn't want Chelsie to win, but in other interviews she said that she did, so I don't really know if I buy that. I feel like it's just like a heat of the moment thing, so I don't really buy that she doesn't want to vote for Chelsie. Random thing to note here is that Leah actually was convinced that like going to the end with Chelsie was the correct move, so I'm not really too surprised that right now, I think she's still a little misted. I think she still isn't able to recognize the game that Chelsie has been playing and thinking that she had a chance against her. So again, I think give her a few more rounds and maybe that's going to turn around. But aside from that, the only other thing to really talk about is the Quinn and Leah of it all. Quinn Leah, or as the Big Brother Instagram called it, Quia. No, I'm not calling them that. It's Quinn Leah. It's very similar to like Comerica last season. No, it's Quinn Leah. That's what makes the most sense. Quia, just no, I'm not doing that. There's been a lot of talk recently about, the scene with Leah a couple weeks ago where she talked about how she had a crush on Quinn. People were saying that that was not authentic and that that was taken from something else, and there was a lot of controversy surrounding that. But then Leah won HOH and spent a good majority of it just talking about Quinn and how much she missed him and started to adapt certain tendencies. And I feel like it was pretty obvious at that point that, yes, she actually does like Quinn. And that is confirmed here, where Angela comes into the house, talks about how, I guess Makensy told her before she left that, like, Leah and Quinn, they're a duo and that they like each other. And Angela didn't really believe it, but Leah confirms to Quinn that she actually does have a crush on him. And yeah, it seems like these two actually do like each other. And what I will say to this is I have seen a lot of debate over the week as to whether or not this is actually going to be a thing, or if Leah is just kind of in a state where, you know, she wants some kind of romantic relationship and she hasn't had anyone and Quinn's there and she's going to end up leaving Quinn once she gets back into the real world. And ultimately, I think we really just kind of need to shut the fuck up. Like, if I'm being honest, like, it's not really on us to tell Quinn and Leah what to do. Ultimately, they're the ones that are going to make decision as to whether or not they want to stay together. I have seen plenty of Big Brother couples that I thought for sure they were not going to last. The best example I can give of this is probably JC Lynn and Gino from, like, Big Brother Canada 10. You can look back at my podcast I did. I said I don't think these two are going to last. I think they'll be, you know, they won't be together by Thanksgiving. They're still together to this day. So, like, ultimately, when it comes to Quinn and Leah and the future between them, that's on them. Like, I'm not going to tell you right now what I think they should do, because if they like each other, they like each other. And if they can make it work, then great. And I'm happy for them. As long as it's mutual, as long as they're able to have a healthy relationship, then great. If not, then, well, at least you tried it. And, you know, you're leaving hopefully as friends and hopefully everything's okay. Like, I really just don't care. Like, I've seen so much controversy surrounding this topic on BB Twitter, and I just don't understand why this matters so much. Why do we care so much that Quinn and Leah are together or whether they're not? Like, ultimately, like I said, it really is up to them. Do I like the idea of them together? Do I think that maybe they would be, you know, kind of, you know, cute together? Like, sure, yeah, I think that I definitely do see the chemistry there, but ultimately, I just don't really care all that much. It's entirely on them to decide what they want to do, and I hope, regardless of what they decide, that they're happy and that they're able to come out of this house feeling more refreshed and better about themselves than ever. If they're able to go the distance, then great. But if not, then, you know, they tried. Like, that's the best way to sum it up. So that's really all I have to say about that. Other than that, really not much to this Jury House segment. Really not much to this at all. I feel like in past seasons, we really just haven't gone all that much. Again, Big Brother 24 being the only exception, with us getting some really good Jury House stuff. But aside from that, I feel like the Jury House has just not really been all that exciting. And this is probably, I think, one of the more boring Jury House segments we've gotten in a while. I like all these personalities, but right now, they like each other. There's no tension going on there. I don't think there's going to be any real tension going on. So I don't feel like these Jury House segments are going to be all that exciting. I don't feel like they're going to give me a lot to talk about, other than it is clear that the majority of them are Team Chelsie. I don't see a bitter jury coming into effect here. And again, I really do think we have to chalk it up to how good Chelsea's jury management has been. Something I have not talked about because at the time they weren't accessible to me. Are the goodbye messages, specifically for Leah and Angela. I think her goodbye messages to them in particular are so crucial. The way that she talks to Leah and says how much of a threat she was and how great of a game she played and how she can't wait to see her outside the house, I think is really great. Same with Angela, the way she talks to her about how, you know, she was becoming a really big threat and she created this great story for herself and how much she cares about her. I think that has been so on point. And same with Quinn, same with T-Core. I think her jury management has just been impeccable, and I've seen some people say that they don't really think she's had great jury management, and I fundamentally disagree. I think she's done what you needed to do, explaining her moves, but also doing it in a respectful way and doing it in a way where she's not talking down to them. She's hyping them up. She's talking about why they need to go, why they were such threats in the game. That is the way to go about it. Don't do what Rubina does and just be really spiteful and talk about how you're happy to see them go, or what MJ's doing and just robotically saying what you did the entire game, and I did this and this is the move I made, but I'm not saying in a confident way. It's almost like I wasn't the one behind it, but I have now conditioned myself to believe that I'm the one behind it, and so I'm gonna sit here and talk to you like this. Like, no, that's not the way to go about this at all. I feel like Chelsie just has the perfect mix when it comes to jury management. And so I really do feel pretty confident that if Chelsea's in the end, she will easily win this game. And I think this jury house segment has me more confident than ever that that's going to be the case. So I guess we'll just go ahead and talk about this final four. And look, I mean, I feel like I'm just going to say the same thing I did last week. I feel like at this point it's pretty clear what's going to happen, but there's a little bit more of a possibility here. There are definitely outcomes where I think this can go in a different direction. If, let's say, Rubina wins HOH, obviously Rubina's not going to go, and it's going to be one of Chelsie, Cam, or MJ going, and ultimately at that point, I don't think it's great, unless Chelsie wins veto, I don't really know what ends up happening there. I think MJ most likely goes in most scenarios. If Cam wins veto, yeah, MJ's just out, and that's just going to be the reality of it all, because he can't get rid of Rubina, he's not going to get rid of Chelsie, it's just going to end up being MJ at that point. But if MJ wins veto, that's where things get interesting here. I think she most likely takes out Cam, but I think she most likely takes out Cam there. But then if Chelsie wins veto, that's where things get a little bit more exciting. And I think that we could really see a bit of a shakeup if she does end up taking out MJ or Cam. That is her final three of sorts, and if it's immediately upended by Rubina winning veto, that could not be great. But the more interesting scenario is Rubina winning veto at that point. If Cam, Chelsie, or MJ win HOH, and then Rubina wins veto, then it gets a little bit more exciting, because I generally don't know at this point what she would do. But I don't think she'd evict MJ. I think the fact that MJ reassured her that she has her back and she wants this final three to happen, and she's been enforcing it as much as she has, if she's able to let Rubina know that, hey, I was advocating for you, I was making sure that you did not go last week, I think that could be really good. Now, do I think MJ is actually going to do that? Not really. I don't know. I will say, MJ in that conversation with Cam and Chelsie, probably the most agency I have seen her have all game, aside from Janky Week, of course. I think that MJ was a completely different MJ, and I kind of want that MJ back because I really like the way she played there. But regardless, if she is able to have that in her, it showed me that she's capable. She has it in her. When she wants something done, she really does push hard for it. And I think she made some really great points about Rubina and how, she's good in high pressure situations and how she could win the HOH and it could go in their favor. I mean, I think that, she did a really good job, and how Kimo's really good in high pressure situations and how Rubina hasn't really won comps. I think that's all really great, and I think if Rubina finds out any of that, I don't think Rubina ends up voting out MJ. I think at that point, it's going to be interesting to see who it ends up being out of Cam or Chelsie. Assuming that Chelsie doesn't have HOH, at that point, Cam ends up going. But what you're seeing is that, again, there aren't many scenarios where Chelsie goes next week. There really aren't. And I think that MJ winning HOH was just really good for her, because it really did seem like MJ was going to go in Final 5. And that could have been disastrous for Chelsie in the Final 4, because if you have Kimo and Rubina in there, then it really could have ended up being bad. And that was another one of the reasons why putting up Cam didn't make sense for Chelsie, because you're now allowing Kimo and Rubina to stay in the game. And that wouldn't have really gone all that well. There was even a point where MJ maybe didn't even want Cam to go. So again, a lot of it just didn't really end up making sense. Other than that, I don't think there's much else to talk about here. It's pretty clear what I think is going to happen at this point in the game. Rubina most likely goes out in 4th if she does not win HOH. If she wins veto, obviously she doesn't go either. But if one of those two things does not happen, it does seem like Rubina is pretty much locked to go at 4, and then we have the final 3 of Cam, Chelsie, and MJ, which right now, it does seem like that would be the most interesting final 3, because I don't really know what direction it would go. MJ takes Chelsie, but I don't really know who Cam takes at that point. I think that would really just have to see how that situation goes. And then Chelsie, I don't know what direction Chelsie goes in. She's saying she wants to take MJ, but I could also see her taking Cam. So I don't know. It also should be noted that this is the first Final Four since Big Brother 13 where there are 3 girls in the Final Four. I think that's insane. Like, generally, I don't know how it has been that long, but I really, again, gotta think we gotta chalk it up to just how equitable all of the comps have been this season, and how fair most of them been. Have we had so many different winners? How, most of the comps have been either quizzes or strategy comps. I think that's all been really great, and this is really the impact of all that. So I think that's all really great to see. But other than that, we're really nearing the end here. I don't understand, again, why they're doing Final Four in the way that they are. They're having Sunday's episode be the HOH and nominees, and then the veto, and then Thursday's just eviction, and then a random interview with Jag for some reason. First of all, I don't know why you are going to Jag for his opinions on the endgame, because, look, I love Jag as a person. I don't love the comments he said about Surrey, but other than that, I think he's a decent guy. He's a terrible strategist, like truly a horrifically bad strategist. And the fact that you would interview him about, what you should do in a Final Four scenario when he didn't even make the correct move in evicting Matt. Like, yes, he lost to Matt, but still probably was not the best move. I just think is ridiculous. And I think just in general, I don't know why I don't know why we need to spend so much time on that. Yes, they do interviews normally, but just having Jag there, it just feels kind of weird. Yes, he won last season, but I just feel like there's other people you could have chose from. But yeah, overall, we're almost nearing the end. I'm definitely ready for it to end at this point. This is the other reason why it sucks that we have this extra week, because I feel like at this point, if we were at the end, like if the finale was on Sunday, I would be like, okay, it ran a little long, but at least it's almost over. At least we can say, yes, it started to get a little bit boring, but it's ending on a high note, and, we're now down to 3, and the finale is going to be on Sunday, but instead, we still have another whole week to go, and I just don't understand why. Why do we need another whole week of this when it's going to be so obvious, especially if Rubina doesn't win HOH, what ends up happening? I don't understand it. I don't know why you couldn't have just... And recently, they fixed this problem. They've been doing Sunday's episode in one episode. I don't know why you can't just do that here. You could easily do just the eviction episode on Sunday and then have the episode Thursday just be the recap episode and then have the finale on Sunday. The finale is still on a Sunday, but I don't understand why you structure it in this way. I don't really think we need another full week. I don't think the house guests want another full week. It just doesn't really make sense. But other than that, I think that's really all I have to say about this week of Big Brother. Like I said, not really a ton to talk about here in terms of substance. A lot of it was just me ranting. I don't know how long this video is at this point. It's probably longer than I expect it to be, like it has been every single week. But other than that, that's really it for my thoughts. Of course, if you enjoy this video, I have a ton of other Big Brother content. I have a ton of other videos on here covering this season of Big Brother, as well as other seasons I've talked about. I'm also currently covering this latest season of Survivor 47. I've done reviews for the first 2 episodes. I haven't watched the third one yet. I'm probably going to do so very shortly. Very excited to watch that episode. Not so excited about the outcome. I already know what ends up happening. It's a little sad, but we'll get to that when we get... We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm also doing weekly reviews of both Agatha All Along and The Penguin. I just put up my review of the first 2 episodes, so definitely look forward to that of the first 3 episodes, and I will be getting my review of episode 4 up very soon, so look forward to that. The Penguin, I still have to watch the second episode, but I have seen the first one. I just need to review the second episode, and then I'm caught up on that one, as well as a plethora of other movies and TV shows. So if you're interested in all of that, definitely check out my channel, and also consider subscribing. Would love to have you be a part of all of that. But that's really it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys are thinking this week overall. Left your thoughts in it. And I will see you guys later. Okay, bye. Don't worry about your laundry.